there's a number of reasons why people don't actively commit in their lives to eating organic food, and presumably the one everybody talks about, the one they try to make it about is, oh well, it's too expensive, and I've done some videos about that, and it's pretty easy to establish that that's not the case. So the question is, why don't people do it? And I'm not talking, why don't people care about it? I'm talking about, why is it that people who think that they care about it, who identify as people who care about it, why aren't they doing it? And I think there's two reasons that sort of hit the top of the charts, normally speaking. And I'd say that number one is friends and family. And number two is convenience. So I remember we had somebody visit here, and if she's watching, she'll know I'm talking about her. And she said, well, I really do prefer to eat organic, and I totally understand. I get it. But when it comes to preferring things, if you had chocolate ice cream and vanilla ice cream in front of you, if you prefer the vanilla, you will take the vanilla before you take the chocolate. And if you prefer the chocolate, you take the chocolate before the vanilla. But just because you like vanilla, it doesn't mean you're going to pick it if you like the chocolate more. So when it comes to food, you might like the idea of organic agriculture. You might like the idea of eating it, and you might enjoy it when you do eat it and when you do purchase it. But do you like that feeling? Are you fulfilled by that more than you like convenience? That's the question. And so, again, we're as people, as human beings, we're making value judgments all the time. And the decisions you make, they expose slash, what's the other word? They carefully spell out what you're made of, what you value. They're all value judgments. So when you choose to eat conventional food, because it's convenient, it's because it's not that you prefer organic food, because if you truly preferred it, that's what you would choose all the time. Those are our preferences, unless there was some extenuating circumstance, just that you would pick that, because that would be your preference. It's very simple. If you prefer just about anything, that's what you end up doing, because it's your preference. Unless you prefer it, and you even prefer it over the convenience. But now you're trying to weigh in somebody else's preference, and this is where friends and family come in. And it's kind of funny, because it's like drugs, or any kind of, alcohol or whatever. Cigarettes is another good example. There's a culture around it. There's relationships. It's complicated. So you buy organic food, only organic food, and that's what you put in your fridge, and that's what you're eating. But then you go out after work with your friends, and they don't eat organic, and your friends are like, hey man, you coming with us? And so you go with them, and you eat crap, and it's not really your preference, but there's a new preference that's weighing in now. Do you prefer organic food more than you prefer your friendships, your relationships? And if we get real black and white about it, because I knew another fellow, and he would come here, and I gave him some advice. He's eating organic. He feels great. He's telling me he feels great, and then he comes shopping again. I say, how you feeling now? He says, oh, well, it was my friend's birthday, and we went out and actually had a pretty rough night. And so, people will think, hey man, that's cold. Preferring your food over your friends? Well, exactly what kind of friends are those? If A, you're not even able to tell them that the food they want you to eat with them is going to harm you, or B, you tell them and they don't care. What kind of friends are they if they think that you should take upon yourself the consequences of destroying the earth and destroying yourself just to have a good time? That's not what friendship is. Sure as hell isn't what family should be, although all too often that's exactly the case. And so you're like, you know what, actually I don't eat food that isn't organic. And immediately it's like, oh, you're a snob. You're an elitist. And yeah, sure, guilty as charged. If only eating the best food and providing the best food for my family makes me a snob, okay, well then that's the new definition of snob and I like it. I think snobs are pretty great. Because if being a snob means you have wisdom to commit to not harming yourself and your children, that's awesome. And elitist? Damn straight. Absolutely. Anybody who can see clearly what kind of good decision to make and make it all the time and never compromise, that is what I call elite. 100%. And so, you know, these are the issues. In that descending order, I would say, you know, because when you quit, I made that comparison before. You know, if you quit drinking with your buddies, how long are they your buddies? If you're like, you know what, that's a pretty destructive lifestyle, I'm not going to do that anymore. And they're like, come on, man, let's go for a drink. And you're like, you know, I don't do that anymore. Well, they're not your friends anymore because they weren't your friends. You know, you quit smoking and now, you know, you kind of stay in your, you know, you stay inside, you eat your lunch, and you don't go outside and have a cigarette with whoever. And you kind of lose touch with that crowd. You're not going to sit there and stand there while they have a cigarette. That's not wise or even fun. Drugs, marijuana, same thing. You know, try quitting smoking dope and see how many of your dope smoking friends call you on the weekend. It's all the same thing. And what? Would it be mean to say, actually, I prefer sobriety more than those friends? You know, they'll make it sound like you're picking food over friends, but really what you're doing is you're choosing life over death, and they kind of want company while they kill themselves, and they certainly don't want any kind of disturbance in the status quo mentioning anything about the fact that they're also being irresponsible, because that's not what they want to hear. And so when you tell your friends and family, actually, I'm not coming over for such and such an event or dinner because I'm not eating that kind of food anymore. Yeah, they'll lay all kinds of accusations against you, but they ought not to. And if they're going to accuse you of wrongdoing for making good decisions, then those are evil people. That's all there is to it. It's evil to accuse somebody of evil for doing the right thing. And I know many of them don't know, and I've done another video on ignorance that kind of explains why people continue to not know, even though you've told them more than once, requires ignoring. But that's a big issue. Friends and family and social standing, you don't want to be known as that person or whatever. Do you love the truth more than your friends and family? Do you love the truth more than your appearances in front of them? Because that's really what it boils down to, right? Because if you really love your friends and family, you'll want to influence them not to poison themselves. And you'll be willing to be seen as an asshole or a self-righteous jerk to that end. You'd be willing to give up your life and your reputation to set an example that they can respect. Because let's face it, if you tell them organic's better and then they're like, hey man, what's the big deal? Come have a burger with us. And then you do. Well, you've only demonstrated to them that organic has no value because you don't value it. So how can you persuade them it has value when you evidently don't value it? So how are you going to help people make the right decision if you keep compromising them just so that you can stay friends with them? That's crazy land. Bananas. So if you love your friends and family, you'll be willing to be hated by them or rejected by them, or at least slightly disliked by them or rejected by them in order to set a proper example of what doing the right thing is. And that's like number one on the list of why people don't commit, because they're constantly compromising to save their appearances with people, whatever those relationships. And yeah, convenience, that's another huge one. People just can't get past, because there's no organic restaurants. Maybe there is, and they're super expensive, and they're in bigger cities. But for the most part, there's not very many like maybe they have organic salad or they serve an organic steak. But like I'm talking like all across the board, you're not eating any GMOs, you're not being poisoned. Hardly exists, and it certainly is not very convenient or affordable. So that's another big one. People can't handle just not getting away and just being served and just menu and I want that thing, and they bring it to you and you eat it and they take it away and do your dishes and you just walk away like nothing happened. That people just love that feeling of importance, which is like hugely historically abnormal, like hugely. Only the very wealthy had that experience. You didn't just get to, just as your lowest income bracket of society, just wander into a building and have somebody serve you hand and foot. That did not exist. So the fact that most people can't let go of this thing they shouldn't even have, that is not historically normal, just goes to show what happens when you spoil people. You give them too much convenience and cheap pleasure, and they immediately can't live without it. And so that's a big one for people to give up, because it's that restaurant experience is one of the number one ways that people are sedated into living mediocre lives. Because if having almost no money, right on the poverty line, can hardly pay your bills and you're in credit card debt, when you can still go somewhere on Friday night and be treated like a king, you just don't really have any incentive to be better and think bigger and take on more responsibility and be a sound and truthful human being. Because those are all the things that help to prosper you in life. And so this whole cheap food thing, I mean, there's a reason why, like, you drive, Lethbridge here, where I live just outside Lethbridge, and it's getting worse all the time. There's so many bloody restaurants, it's inconceivable. And I'm sure it's the same elsewhere, but it's nuts. You drive down the main strip at 6, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock at night, and it's just parking lots are loaded with people who are taking no responsibility for what they're eating. None whatsoever. Zero. Like some days I feel like everyone in this city is eating out all at the same time. You look at how many people there are and you think, like, who's at home right now? Who's being a normal human being, a historically normal person? But no, people, it's a huge problem. If you don't believe me, wait and see what happens. I try to remind people that in the scriptures, and it doesn't matter if you're atheist or otherwise, but if everybody knows Sodom and Gomorrah, and the comparison, it was like Sodom and Gomorrah. It's used as a replacement word for, a really gross, evil place, at least in religious circles. So, and everybody thinks, it was the homosexuality, it was the sodomy or whatever, they were just so immoral. And yet we have the record in the scriptures. It says, the idleness of hands, right? Not enough work to do. I think when you're working like 7.5 hours for 5 days a week, I think that's a lot of idle time you have on your hands, for sure. And fullness of bread. In other words, food was cheap and easy. There was lots of it. There was no shortage whatsoever. And the pride of life, just people who are entitled to their own opinion. They just proud of whatever it is that they're doing and make no apology. Those three things, and that's exactly what we have now. You only have a restaurant industry. You only have convenience food when you've got idle hands and just full of bread, just too much food. Just too easy and too convenient to fill yourself up with calories. And it creates huge health problems, but it's such a lure that when people try to go organic, they can't get past that one. And so don't get fooled into thinking that this has anything to do with money or possibility. It's not difficult. It's not expensive. It's just not. But probably your friends and family won't like you very much. There'll be some who turn against you, no question. It's every time you do the right thing, you lose a whole section of your relationships. They just disappear. And it's not going to be terribly, incredibly convenient. It won't be inconvenient. It'll just become part of your life, but it will not be the life of luxury and ease that you've been experiencing thus far. When you commit to organic, your life slows down and gets a little quieter. There's less people around, and there's a little bit more work to be done. And for one, I think that's wonderful, but that's the reality. Don't let anyone tell you it's about the money.